Hey everybody, welcome back! I really suck at updating my channel, but I said I would complete this retrospective, so let's get into it! Back in 1987, Shigeru Miyamoto and Takeshi Tezuka got together to discuss creating a sequel to their smash hit, Legend of Zelda. Apparently before the meeting, they had each smoked enough weed to make Snoop Dogg tap out, because Legend of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link is weird. You would think when making a sequel, you would take things you learned from the original and expand on those ideas, and polish them. Or you could just throw the whole thing out. Legend of Zelda 2 plays nothing like the original. Instead of being a top-down action-adventure game, it plays kinda like a standard RPG, where you have a world map that's top-down with random battles, dungeons, and towns, but then everything outside the world map plays like a side-scrolling beat-em-up. What was the mental process behind this design choice? And it apparently never caught on, because they never used this style of gameplay again. The closest the series ever got was the CDI titles, and we don't talk about those. The only game I can think of that does the same kind of RPG/beat-em-up mix is one that I covered a while back here on the channel, Super Ninja Boy. However, despite being such a complete departure from its predecessor, it was actually a very well-received game. It sold nearly 4.5 million copies worldwide and was the second highest rating game of the year in Japan's Famitsu magazine, losing out only to Dragon Quest II. In 2008, Nintendo Power Magazine, a magazine whose very existence was due in part to the original Legend of Zelda, rated The Legend of Zelda 2 as the 12th best NES title of all time. So, where does this game fall? Is it good? Is it a confused mess? Well, let's take a look. This is one of the few games in the franchise that serves as a direct sequel. The basic rundown of the plot is, after Ganon was destroyed, Impa told Link a sleeping spell was cast on Princess Zelda. She will wake only with the power of number 3 Triforce sealed away in a palace in Hyrule. To break the seal, crystals must be placed in statues in 6 well-guarded palaces. Link set out on his most adventuresome quest yet. It takes place a few years after the original game, when Link discovers a mark on the back of his hand. A piece of the Triforce. To find out what's going on, he seeks out a woman named Impa, who tells him the person who holds the secret to the Triforce is, of course, Princess Zelda. But not the one from the first game! This Zelda is different! This one's been under some kind of sleeping curse for hundreds of years because her brother, seeking the secrets of the Triforce, had a wizard curse her. And then he felt bad about it, so by royal decree, all princesses born to the royal family from then on had to be named Zelda. But why though? Why couldn't you just have the original Zelda be the one with the secrets, and she gets cursed by a wizard or something? By original Zelda, I of course mean the one from the first game, because apparently this Zelda is the original Zelda, even though she's the second Zelda. Why make it so needlessly convoluted? Anyway, you have to find the 6 palaces scattered around the kingdom and put crystals into statues. Meanwhile, Ganon's followers are trying to kill you, because if they sprinkle Link's blood on Ganon's ashes, it will bring him back. Somehow. Of course, the game doesn't really tell you any of this. I figured it out by reading stuff out of the Hyrule Compendium and Wikipedia. The only mention of Ganon throughout the entire game is the game over screen, and honestly there's nothing to indicate that this is a different Zelda. So most of this game revolves around heading out to all the different palaces and placing crystals into the statues at the end. You can stop in a number of towns whose names would later become those of the 7 sages, where you can solve problems for the locals and learn new spells and sword techniques. The game introduced the downward stab move that Link has in the Smash Bros. Games. The spells are at least all useful, which is a refreshing change of pace. In most games, you get a spell list that's miles long, even though you're only going to end up using maybe 3 of them. But here you only get 8 spells, and you will actually have to use them all. Combat is incredibly simple, but requires a surprising amount of thought and strategy, at least when it comes to enemies with shields. There's a decent roster of enemies, and much like the first game, they change color to indicate a shift in difficulty. Darknuts still suck the worst. They have a ton of health and a shield. The best tactic I find is to jump and strike the head quick on the way down before they get a chance to get their shield up. The bosses are fun and challenging too, with such memorable characters as Horsehead, so named for his horse head. The goal is to hit him in his horse head. And then there's this guy. His name is Gumi, but I like to call him Thud. You have to dodge his giant ball and chain and strike him in the gut. It's not easy. Then there's Darknut on a horse! This battle kinda sucks because while the first phase is easy to deal with if you have the jumping down strike move, During the second phase, he's just a blue Darknut. And that's horrible, because he can do all the same stuff that makes regular Darknuts so infuriating, but he has a ranged attack. The final boss, Thunderbird, is one of the toughest fights I've ever had to deal with in a game. He flies around shooting little fireballs while you try to jump up and hit him in the face, which is really friggin' hard, because there's so much going on the screen at the same time. This game is also the one to introduce Shadow Link, which is a pretty cool fight on its own. But since it's coming right off the heels of the battle with Thunderbird, it can suck real bad. There is, however, a cheap trick you can exploit. If you duck in the corner and just low slash over and over again, he'll walk right into your sword every time. If you don't feel like cheaping out on the final battle, it works a bit like a Darknut, only tougher. The best way to deal damage is to jump and catch him in the head with a well-timed attack. Now, the most infuriating thing about this game is the game overs. When you lose all your lives, you get sent back to the game's starting point. You don't lose all your progress, thankfully, but you do have to traipse your way across the entire map to get back to where you were, and this can be insanely infuriating, especially in areas like Death Mountain that contain a ton of difficult action screens. You end up getting most of the way through only to fall in a pit or something, and BAM! Back to the beginning! You get to walk all the way back to Death Mountain, then run through all the action sequences again. Have fun with that! Especially with boss fights. When you lose to a boss, you don't get sent back to the beginning of the dungeon. You get sent back to the starting point of the game. Mercifully, this is not the case with the final dungeon. If you game over there, you only get sent back to the start of the dungeon. I would have flown off the damn handle if I had to make the trek back every time Thunderbird killed me. The NPCs in this game are a bit more fun than in the original. There are whole towns populated by people. Sure, they all look the damn same, but usually they get fun bits of dialogue, like this guy. He is Error. I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be saying that his name is Errol, and it just didn't translate well, but to hell with that, I love this! The first time I ran into this, it was so strange and surreal. Dude is just sitting in his house, you walk in and he tells you, "I am Error!" And I have no clue what that's supposed to mean. I feel like I just walked in on this villager having an existential crisis or something. Then there's the ladies who heal you. People often speculate that they must be hookers. You know, they take Link into their homes and suddenly he feels better. But I would generally assume Nintendo wouldn't put that in a Zelda game, so I figure it must just be an inn or something. In some towns, certain NPCs will suddenly turn into bats and sucker punch you if you try to talk to them. So that's fun, and a totally reasonable reaction. How often I've wished for the ability to just morph into a bat to avoid awkward conversation. Also, one of the things that really struck me as odd is there's no money. You don't get charged for anything. It's like after the fall of Ganon, the Kingdom of Hyrule decided to become a communist society, forgoing material wealth and trading you the power to launch fireballs from your hands in exchange for locating a lost mirror. I see no downsides to this. I friggin' love the barter system. Question is, does this apply to everyone in general? Like, hey, thanks for the chickens. I don't have much to trade, so let me teach you the apocalypse spell. I guess the bright side is that the old woman won't be ripping me off for potions anymore. Finally, there's a bunch of items that you need to complete your quest. Most of them are only used in the world map. Like, there's a hammer that breaks big rocks to open up new paths, a raft that lets you cross the ocean, a flute that will put a giant monster to sleep so you can enter a new area, boots that let you walk on the river? Because that's how boots work, I guess. The items in this game kinda bugged me. They're only good for getting you into new areas, and most of them are only ever useful once. They're more like keys than items. In the first game, and the games that followed after, items were great! They were useful! Each time you picked up a new item, you felt a sense of excitement, and they usually had multiple uses, like bombs, the hook shot, magic wands. Like, yeah, they could get you into new areas, but also they were useful in combat and for other things. I guess when it comes down to it, I do enjoy this game. It just doesn't feel much like a Zelda game to me. Now, I'll be fair, that might just be a personal bias, since I've played most of the other games in the series before I got around to this one. Back when it first came out, there was only the original to compare it to, so it likely wasn't that big a deal. But then again, they never went back to this style of game, so I can't be alone in my thinking. My problems with this game largely stem from the way the items were handled, and the fact that it's hard! Like, seriously unforgiving. It would have been fine if a game over sent you back to the beginning of the dungeon, but getting sent back to the beginning of the game, well, that really chapped my ass. I like that NPCs were a bigger part of this game, and the magic system was great. I love the fact that I ended up using every spell I got, instead of just staring at the list going, well, Charm Person sounds interesting, but I think I'm gonna go with Fireball. I guess what I'm driving at is Legend of Zelda 2 is a fantastic game in general, and I highly recommend it. It's just not a particularly Zelda-y game. Still, dig it up, give it a playthrough. I've been Tom, and thanks for watching.
Link, here come to town, come to save the Princess Zelda. Gonna